Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of just like clinical precision.
Right, yeah, like it's black and white.
Exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points and says, there it is, that's the problem.
Broken and not broken.
Yeah. It's clean, it's binary, and honestly, it's comforting. We really like things to be visible and easily categorized like that.
Oh, absolutely. We crave that certainty.
But then you step into the world of human cognition and learning, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just totally useless.
Yeah, it really is. It's a completely different landscape.
It's murky. It's incredibly complex, especially when we are talking about how the human brain actually acquires a completely new language.
Which is what we're looking at today.
Right. And so for you listening, we are going to completely dismantle the way you likely learned English, or, I mean, really any language for that matter.
Because that old school subject mentality most of us grew up with, it is biologically destined to fail.
Destined to fail. Okay, let's unpack this, because it really is a systemic failure.
It is. And our source material today addresses this head on. It's this fascinating text called The Polyglot Mindset, Psychology and Habits for Fluency.
And as we go through these excerpts in this custom deep dive for you, we have to just establish a foundational truth right away.
Right, which is that we are not looking at vocabulary lists here.
No verb conjugation charts.
Thankfully, no. This is a profound exploration of human psychology. It's about habit formation and really how the architecture of your brain is wired.
Like how it's wired to either absorb or just actively repel new information, right? Depending on your environment.
Exactly. So the mission for you today is to actively tear down that old academic approach.
And rebuild your language learning as a seamless, completely stress-free lifestyle.
Which brings us to the first major argument in the text, and it's a heavy hitter.
It really is. The source basically states that most people hit a wall with English because they treat it as a traditional school subject.
Yeah, relying almost entirely on memorizing grammar rules out of context.
It's a perfectly logical trap to fall into, though.
Yeah,
I mean, based on our childhood conditioning.
And for sure. Think about the architecture of a standard school curriculum. Subjects are compartmentalized into these neat little boxes.
Right, like history is just a box of dates and events you memorize.
Mathematics is a box of formulas, You memorize the quadratic equation, you apply it on the test, and you get your grade.
You're done. But the fundamental flaw is categorizing language as one of those boxes.
Because language is not a formula to be solved.
No?
It is a living, breathing, incredibly messy ecosystem.
I always look at this grammar-first approach like, well, it's like trying to learn how to ride a bicycle by reading an incredibly dense technical manual.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Let's really flesh that out for a second.
Yeah.
So you are sitting in a rigid chair in a library.
Safe and quiet?
Exactly. You're reading a chapter on the exact physics of gyroscopic motion.
You're memorizing the precise tensile strength of the steel in the brake cables.
Yes. You calculate the exact mathematical angle you need to lean your body weight into a turn when you're traveling at like 14 miles per hour.
And you study this for weeks.
Weeks. And then you take a written multiple choice test on bicycle riding and you score a perfect 100%.
So you are now, officially, an academic expert on the bicycle.
Congratulations.
But you have never actually felt the pedals under your feet.
Right. You step outside that library, you throw a leg over a physical bicycle, you push off, and you immediately crash straight into a mailbox.
Every single time.
Because knowing the academic physics of balance in your prefrontal cortex is just entirely disconnected from the physical, organic feeling of balancing.
Right, the muscular feeling. The school subject approach demands that you memorize the mechanics of the bike without ever letting you feel the wind in your hair.
Or the gravel under the tires. It just turns communication into this completely sterile intellectual exercise.
And that inevitable crash into the mailbox, that is what leads to one of the most painful, universally documented experiences in the text.
Oh, yes. The plateau.
Exactly. The source calls it the language plateau. And for anyone listening who has ever tried to acquire a skill, especially a language, the visceral reality of this state.
It's the worst. It's that intermediate purgatory.
It really is.
It's like this endless gray parking lot halfway up the mountain. You're putting in the same hours, maybe even studying harder out of sheer frustration.
But your progress has completely flatlined.
You drill flashcards for 2 hours, and then you turn on a movie in English, and you still can't catch the dialogue without subtitles.
It's agonizing.
It is agonizing.
Right.
But the critical insight from the source material changes this entire paradigm.
Yes. The text explicitly identifies this language plateau not as an intellectual ceiling, but as a psychological illusion.
Okay, I want to pause there because that feels really counterintuitive to me.
How so?
Well, when I'm stuck on that plateau, it physically feels like my brain is a hard drive that has just run out of storage space.
Right, like you're full.
Exactly. It feels like I literally cannot cram another phrasal verb into my head.
But that is the illusion at work. The human brain actually has an immense, practically boundless capacity for language.
So what's actually happening then?
The plateau is created by a shift in how you perceive your own progress, which then triggers a cascade of negative psychological effects.
Okay, I see.
Let's look at the math of learning. When you first begin studying English, everything is a revelation.
Oh, yeah. The beginner gains.
Right. Going from knowing absolutely 0 words to knowing 50 words is an infinite percentage increase.
It's huge.
It is a massive, highly visible spike in capability. You can suddenly introduce yourself, order a coffee, ask for directions.
The dopamine hit is just enormous. You feel like an absolute genius.
You're riding high on those initial gains. But fast forward 2 years.
Okay.
You now know 4,000 words. You spend a week studying incredibly hard, and you learn 50 new words.
Which is the same amount of work.
Exactly. But going from 4,000 to 4,050 is a statistical blip. It is a 1% increase. Oh, wow. Yeah, you do not feel that improvement in your daily interactions.
Not at all. The dopamine disappears.
So the lack of perceived progress morphs into this belief that you are failing.
And because you believe you aren't improving, frustration builds. And that frustration directly reduces your motivation to engage with the language.
Which then actually does cause your progress to stall.
Exactly. You manufacture the plateau out of a psychological miscalibration.
That is wild. So if the grammar manuals lead us to this illusionary plateau, and the plateau traps us in a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure, we clearly need a mechanism to break out.
We do. And the text presents a very specific antidote to this. It's a concept called comprehensible input.
Comprehensible input.
Yes, it defines this as consuming material listening or reading where you understand roughly 80% of what is being communicated.
Okay, the 80% rule. This is where we transition from understanding the problem into hard, actionable strategy.
This is the absolute cornerstone of the polyglot methodology. But I have to wonder about that specific metric, though. Like, why 80%?
It's a very specific number.
Right. If the goal is immersion, why not drop yourself into a completely foreign environment where you only understand 10%? Just shock the system.
The trial by fire approach.
Yeah. Or, on the flip side, why not stick to children's media where you understand 100% and build total confidence?
Well, analyzing those two extremes reveals exactly why 80% is the neurological sweet spot.
Okay, let's break them down.
Let's imagine you stick to material where you understand 100% of the vocabulary.
Napa pig.
Exactly. It feels incredibly comfortable. Your ego is very secure because you aren't making mistakes or feeling confused.
But you're just treading water.
Right. Without friction, there is no biological imperative for the brain to adapt, build new neural pathways, or grow.
It's like lifting a 1-pound dumbbell every day and wondering why you aren't getting stronger.
It's passive entertainment, not acquisition.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the other extreme, the 10%?
Right. So you decide to shock the system and watch a dense, rapid-fire political documentary where you only comprehend, say, 40% or less of the words.
Sounds exhausting.
The brain is immediately overwhelmed by the sheer volume of chaotic, unstructured data.
There is no foundational anchor to attach new meaning to.
Exactly. It stops being language and just becomes acoustic noise. Cognitive overload sets in.
You just tune it out. It's like listening to the hum of an air conditioner.
And it reinforces the plateau illusion. You think, I'm terrible at this, I'll never understand native speakers.
So that brings us back to 80%.
Yes. 80% creates a highly specific environment of what researchers call desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty, I like that.
It creates a 20% gap. If you understand 8 out of 10 words in a given sentence, your brain possesses a robust, secure framework of meaning.
You know who is speaking? The tone of the conversation? The general subject matter?
Right. So when you encounter those two unknown words, your brain does not panic. It shifts into puzzle-solving mode.
Oh, so it leverages the context clues to bridge the gap.
The human brain is, at its core, a relentless pattern recognition machine. It is biologically driven to complete incomplete patterns.
Because it hates unresolved loops.
Exactly. Because it understands the 80% surrounding the mystery word, it will instinctively deduce the meaning of the unknown 20%.
And that deduction is the magic moment.
That is the crucial physiological mechanism. When the brain solves that linguistic puzzle on its own, utilizing context rather than just reading a dictionary translation.
The resulting neurological connection is stronger.
Exponentially stronger. The myelin sheath wrapping around that neural pathway becomes thicker.
That distinction is fascinating. It's the difference between someone just handing you the answer key to a riddle versus you wrestling with it and figuring it out yourself.
Right. The answer key is forgotten in 5 minutes.
But the riddle you solved is etched into your memory.
You absorb the vocabulary organically, exactly how a child acquires their mother tongue. No conjugation tables, no memorized rules.
Just continuous exposure to a manageable gap of unknown information.
Precisely.
Okay, I see the elegance of comprehensible input. But, and I have to introduce a massive dose of reality here.
Go for it.
Because this is where the theory hits a brick wall for so many learners. Sitting in your living room, comfortably decoding an 80% podcast with a cup of tea is one thing.
It's safe.
It's very safe. But the moment you step outside, walk into a bustling cafe, and actually try to produce the language in front of a real native speaker,
Things change.
the puzzle-solving brain just vanishes. I know this firsthand. You freeze. You forget words you've known for years.
Your mind goes blank.
Completely blank.
Yeah.
So how does the book account for this terrifying physiological panic?
This brings us to section 2 of the source material. It shifts from the mechanics of input to the psychology of output.
Okay.
The text identifies this specific barrier as the affective filter.
The affective filter. The anatomy of fear and learning.
Exactly. And the book does not dismiss this panic as just nerves. It highlights a profound neurological reality about what is actually happening under the hood during those moments of freezing.
Let's really dig into that.
Yeah.
Because telling someone, just don't be afraid to look silly is useless advice.
Completely useless.
We are inherently social creatures. Our evolutionary biology dictates that our survival depends on the cohesion of the tribe.
We need to fit in.
Right. Appearing incompetent, sounding foolish, or failing to communicate effectively with peers, it triggers a deep, primal alarm system.
It feels like a genuine threat.
Yes. Knowing it's just a language mistake doesn't stop the heart from racing or the palms from sweating. So how does understanding the affective filter actually solve that physical response?
What's fascinating here is that it solves it by revealing the physical response isn't just a byproduct of learning. It is a mechanical roadblock.
What do you mean?
When you experience that anxiety, the fear of a social misstep or judgment about the brain's amygdala, which is our ancient threat detection center, lights up. It perceives the social embarrassment as a literal survival threat. In response, it floods the system with cortisol.
Preparing for fight or flight.
Exactly. And in that heightened state of survival, the brain ruthlessly diverts energy away from higher-order cognitive functions.
Wow.
It quite literally shuts down the language acquisition device in the prefrontal cortex.
So it's not a memory lapse, it's a localized power outage.
A power outage, yes.
Your brain has actively cut the electrical current to the department that stores your English vocabulary, all because it thinks you need that energy to run away from a predator.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. You are operating in safe mode. And the implication of this physiological reality changes everything about how we approach study.
Because anxiety isn't just unpleasant.
No, it actively prevents learning from occurring. You cannot white-knuckle, grit your teeth, or force your way into fluency if your amygdala is firing.
This completely upends the traditional view of the classroom environment, doesn't it?
It really does.
I mean, the strict teacher, the red pen, the high-stakes exam, these are basically factories designed to trigger the amygdala.
If the affective filter is high, the input, no matter how perfectly calibrated to that 80% sweet spot, simply bounces off.
It never reaches the acquisition center.
This is why relaxation and emotional safety are not luxuries in language learning. They are physiological prerequisites for the brain to function.
Which naturally leads us to the source's strategy for lowering that filter.
Right. How do we turn off the alarm?
If mistakes trigger the amygdala, and the amygdala shuts down the brain, we have to fundamentally alter our relationship with making mistakes.
We do. And the text argues that successful learners reframe mistakes as data points rather than personal failures.
Okay, this reframing is how you manually override the amygdala's alarm system. You have to strip the ego and the morality out of the error.
Let's look at what a data point mindset looks like in reality.
Okay, let's apply this. Say a learner is in a business meeting, speaking English, and they confidently use the completely wrong verb tense.
A classic scenario.
The native speakers around the table look momentarily confused. In that microsecond, the heat rises in the learner's chest.
The panic starts.
The instinct is to flush with shame, apologize profusely, and let the affective filter just slam shut. How do they act like a scientist instead?
Think about a chemist in a laboratory working on a new compound.
Oh.
They mix chemical A and chemical B, expecting a nice blue liquid. Instead, it turns into this sludgy brown mess and emits a terrible odor.
It smells awful.
The chemist does not fall to the floor, weep, question their intellect, and declare themselves a failure of a human being.
Right, they don't take the brown sludge personally.
Exactly. They observe the reaction neutrally. They pull out a notebook and write, hypothesis incorrect. A plus B yields brown sludge, adjusting variables for next attempt.
It is simply neutral information guiding the next step.
When the language learner sees the confusion on their colleagues' faces, they have that exact same microsecond choice.
They can let the amygdala take over.
Or they can mentally log. Okay, using good instead of went disrupts communication. Hypothesis incorrect. Data point logged.
It is a calibration error, not an indictment of your self-worth.
Right.
By treating it as a neutral data point, you keep the ego out of the equation. The amygdala stays quiet, and the language center remains powered on.
And once you internalize this reframing, once the fear of the mistake is removed, the open road to fluency is suddenly clear of debris.
The neurological pathway is unblocked.
But an open road still requires an engine to drive down it.
Exactly. If forcing ourselves through stressful, high-stakes study sessions is counterproductive, how do we actually build momentum?
How do we structure progress without falling back into the trap of 3-hour grammar study sessions?
Right. This is where the text introduces the mechanics of fluency, specifically contrasting what it calls the binge with the 15-minute rule.
The binge. This is the desperate, guilt-driven method most adults default to when trying to acquire a new skill.
Oh, we all know the scenario. You've been busy all week. It's Sunday afternoon. The guilt of ignoring your English studies is just crushing you.
So you clear off your desk?
You make a massive pot of coffee, lock the door, and swear you are going to master the subjunctive mood for 4 uninterrupted hours.
The first 30 minutes are very productive.
Yeah.
But by hour 2, cognitive fatigue sets in. Your attention is fracturing.
By hour 3, you are simply staring at the symbols on the page.
Absorbing absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all, but continuing out of pure stubbornness and guilt.
Which is incredibly inefficient.
I always think of this approach like trying to water a delicate houseplant.
Oh, I like this.
If you bring a plant home and give it a small splash of water every single morning, the soil remains consistently moist.
The root system has time to absorb the nutrients.
Exactly. The plant thrives. But if you neglect that plant Monday through Saturday, the soil turns to concrete. The microscopic roots dry up and wither.
And then comes Sunday.
Driven by that Sunday guilt, you take a massive 5-gallon bucket of water and just dump it over the plant all at once.
You don't save the plant.
No. You drown it. The water violently washes away the topsoil, the plant goes into physiological shock, and the vast majority of the water just runs off onto the floor anyway.
Because the organism simply cannot process that volume of input simultaneously.
Exactly.
The brain reacts the exact same way to a binge study session. The text introduces the scientifically backed alternative, a concept known as spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition.
Yes. This leverages the brain's natural forgetting curve, originally documented by Hermann Ebbinghaus.
I'm assuming the forgetting curve is basically the brain's way of cleaning house.
Essentially, yes. The brain is an incredibly efficient energy manager.
It has to be.
Right. When you encounter a new English phrase on a Monday, the brain holds it in short-term memory. But if you don't use it again, the brain assumes this information is irrelevant to your ongoing survival.
Over the next few hours and days, the memory decays rapidly.
It's a biological process of pruning.
It's like Marie Kondoing the neural pathways. Does this phrasal verb spark joy or ensure survival? No. Toss it out to save energy.
Exactly. But spaced repetition hacks this mechanism.
How so?
If you encounter that exact same phrase again, right at the moment you're about to forget it, say, 24 hours later on Tuesday, you interrupt the pruning process.
Oh.
You send a powerful biological signal. Wait, this data point has reappeared in my environment. It must be vital.
The brain responds by thickening the myelin sheath around that specific neural pathway.
reinforcing the connection. You see it again on Thursday, the pathway becomes thicker. A week later, it hardens into a permanent neurological highway.
This is why the 15-minute rule, engaging with the language for just 15 focused minutes every single day, is infinitely superior to a 4-hour Sunday binge.
You are constantly intercepting the forgetting curve.
Signaling to the brain that the language is a permanent fixture of your environment.
But here is the practical friction point for you, the listener.
Right, because willpower is a finite, easily depleted resource.
Very easily depleted.
Relying on sheer discipline to carve out 15 minutes every day, especially after a grueling day at work, is a recipe for failure.
It's too much friction.
So what does this all mean? How do we guarantee those 15 minutes without burning through our willpower?
By removing the need for willpower entirely. The source calls this environment design.
Environment design.
It is the acknowledgement that human beings, regardless of their goals, will fundamentally take the path of least resistance.
If the guitar is hidden in the closet, you won't practice.
Out of sight, out of mind.
But if it's sitting on a stand in the middle of the living room, you'll pick it up.
Precisely. Environment design and language learning is about making English the path of least resistance.
So how do we do that?
The text offers highly specific interventions, starting with something as simple as changing the operating language of your smartphone.
It sounds like a minor tweak, but let's break down the impact of that. An average person unlocks their phone anywhere from 50 to 150 times a day. If your phone is in your native language, English requires a dedicated, conscious effort to access. You have to find a textbook, sit down, open an app.
That is high friction.
But if the device operating system is in English, you have manufactured a completely frictionless learning environment.
Every time you check the weather forecast, set a morning alarm, navigate a map, or scroll through a settings menu,
You are forcing your brain to process the language.
you are accumulating those 15 minutes in microscopic, effortless increments throughout the day.
You don't have to make time for it because it is already embedded in the digital architecture you rely on to survive the modern world.
Exactly. Another brilliant example from the text is habit stacking through daily chores.
Oh, I love habit stacking.
Taking an immersion podcast like this, very deep dive, and listening to it while doing something else.
While washing the dishes, folding laundry, commuting.
Habit stacking is incredibly powerful, but there is a hidden secondary benefit here that ties directly back to our earlier discussion on the affective filter.
Oh, wait, really? How does folding socks connect to the amygdala?
Think about the posture of studying. When you sit rigidly at a desk with a textbook open, you are signaling to your brain, I am studying. This is an academic test. I must perform well.
And that pressure inherently raises the affective filter. Anxiety ticks upward.
But when you are standing at the sink, your hands submerged in warm, soapy water, scrubbing a frying pan while a podcast plays in the background, what is your primary task?
The primary task is cleaning the pan. The language is totally secondary.
Which means the ego is completely disengaged.
Oh, wow.
The brain is relaxed, the guard is down. Because you are distracted by a physical, low-stakes task, the English input slips right past the amygdala's threat detection system.
And flows directly into the language acquisition center.
Exactly.
It's like a parent sneaking pureed spinach into a kid's fruit smoothie.
That's exactly what it is.
The kid drinks it down happily because it tastes like strawberries, completely unaware they are consuming vital nutrients.
Right. You are sneaking fluency into your subconscious while your conscious mind is focused on getting a stain out of a shirt.
It bypasses the fear completely.
And when you compound that frictionless, low-stress environment design over months and years, massive, undeniable fluency is the only possible outcome.
So to navigate this newly designed environment effectively, we need a framework, a way to articulate this journey and ground these psychological concepts in everyday practice.
Which brings us to a fascinating section of the notes, the practical meta-vocabulary.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The source provides 4 specific English phrasal verbs.
But as requested by the text methodology, we cannot treat these as mere dictionary entries to be memorized.
No, that would be falling right back into the school subject trap. Instead, let's pull these words off the page and see how they actually map the entire psychological landscape we've been exploring today.
I like that. Let's look at the verbs. They are to show up, to keep up, to figure out, and to get over.
Let's role-play this to see it in action. Imagine you, the listener, are walking into a busy coffee shop in an English-speaking city.
Okay, the first verb is to show up. The text defines it as to be present or attend consistently.
In the context of our journey, Showing up is the fundamental baseline of the houseplant analogy. It is the 15-minute rule in action.
You push open the door of the coffee shop.
You didn't stay in your hotel room hiding from the language. You designed your environment so that you have to order your coffee in English.
You don't have to be perfect. Your grammar doesn't have to be flawless.
You just have to be present in the ecosystem.
But the moment you reach the counter, you face the second verb, to keep up, defined as to maintain the same pace as others.
And this is where the trap is sprung. The barista's moving fast, there's a line behind you, and they ask you a rapid-fire question using local slang.
The desperate, burning desire to keep up with their native speed is exactly what spikes the affective filter.
The panic sets in. You feel the gap between their pace and your processing speed.
And the amygdala prepares to shut down the system. The crucial lesson hidden in this verb is that you must actively abandon the need to keep up.
You drop the ego. You accept your own pace. You ask them to repeat it, or you simply accept that you are operating at an 80% comprehension level.
Which activates the third verb, to figure out, to understand or solve something.
Because you refuse to panic about keeping up, your prefrontal cortex remains online.
You use the 80% of the barista sentence. You did catch the tone, the gesture toward the pastry case, the context of a coffee order to figure out the 20% you didn't understand.
You become the detective instead of the terrified student taking a test.
Right.
Figuring out implies a process of deduction, a bit of trial and error, which aligns perfectly with the brain's love for pattern recognition.
And inevitably, during this process, you will make an error. You will mispronounce the pastry or use the wrong preposition.
Which brings us to the final and most vital phrasal verb, to get over.
To overcome a fear or problem.
You have to get over it. You have to get over the ego bruise of the mistake. You have to get over the conditioned trauma from your school days that insists a linguistic error means you are a failure.
You log the mispronounced word as a neutral data point, smile, take your coffee, and move on.
If you cannot get over the affective filter, none of the other mechanics matter.
The comprehensible input, the spaced repetition, the frictionless environment, the entire pipeline is blocked if you cannot get over the fear of looking foolish.
It is a profound sequential blueprint for fluency hidden inside 4 everyday phrases.
It really is.
You show up consistently, you refuse the anxiety of keeping up, you use context to figure out the unknown, and you ruthlessly get over your mistakes.
And that blueprint leads us to the ultimate thesis statement of the source material.
The big conclusion.
Right. After all the psychological deconstruction, the author distills the reality of language acquisition into one definitive, perhaps controversial, ratio.
The text claims, becoming fluent in English is 20% method and 80% psychology.
Let's really sit with that ratio. 20% method, 80% psychology.
Because looking at the multi-billion-dollar language learning industry, you would think it's the exact opposite. We obsess over the 20%.
Entire economies thrive on our obsession with the 20%. Learners will spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars searching for the magic method.
Oh yeah, they buy the most scientifically optimized flashcard algorithms, they hire prestigious tutors.
They debate endlessly on forums about which textbook has the superior approach to teaching the present perfect continuous tense.
We hold on to this fantasy that if we just find the perfect tool, the friction of learning will vanish and we will effortlessly become fluent.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the method is merely the vehicle.
Like a car.
Exactly. You could own a Ferrari of a study method, pedagogically flawless, perfectly structured, but if your psychology, the 80%, is broken, you are sitting in a Ferrari with no fuel and a terrified driver.
That's a great image.
If your affective filter is permanently raised because you fear judgment, if you rely on guilt-driven Sunday binges instead of daily habits, the perfect method will not save you. You will crash.
But let's flip the scenario. Let's say your method is, quite frankly, a bit of a mess.
Okay.
You don't have a pristine textbook. Maybe your method consists entirely of watching cooking videos on YouTube in English, listening to a few podcasts, and awkwardly chatting with people in online gaming lobbies.
Your 20% method is inefficient and chaotic.
Yet, if your 80% psychology is completely dialed in,
If you are relaxed, if you have abandoned the need to be perfect,
if you treat every embarrassing mistake as a hilarious, highly valuable data point,
if you have stacked your habits so that you are interacting with the language for 15 minutes every single day without relying on willpower,
then fluency is no longer a question of if. The text is very clear on this point. Fluency becomes an inevitability.
A learner with a resilient, calibrated psychology will eventually absorb the language through sheer, joyful, continuous exposure, regardless of how messy their method is.
It is an incredibly empowering paradigm shift. It lifts this massive, crushing burden off of your raw intellect or your memory capacity and places the power entirely within your control, your habits, and your mindset.
You do not need a genius-level IQ to master English.
You just need a frictionless environment and a deeply forgiving scientific relationship with your own errors.
As we summarize the key takeaways from the journey we've taken through your notes today, the overarching narrative is one of liberation from outdated systems.
We started by recognizing the fundamental flaw of the academic approach, realizing that memorizing grammar in a vacuum is like studying the physics of a bicycle without ever riding it,
We identified the language plateau not as a failure of your brain, but as a trick of perception.
and found the remedy in comprehensible input.
We learned why that 80% sweet spot is necessary to trigger the brain's pattern recognition engine, thickening the neural pathways without causing the cognitive overload of total immersion.
We confronted the biology of fear, understanding that the affective filter isn't just a metaphor,
A spiked amygdala literally cuts power to the language acquisition center.
which makes reframing our mistakes into neutral data points a biological necessity, not just a self-help platitude.
We explored the mechanics of the engine, contrasting the root drowning Sunday binge with the neurological power of the 15-minute rule.
We saw how spaced repetition intercepts the forgetting curve, and how environment design, like changing a phone language or stacking habits with daily chores, bypasses willpower entirely.
And finally, we mapped that journey through the meta vocabulary of showing up, refusing to panic about keeping up, figuring out the context, and getting over our bruised egos.
Ultimately proving that this entire endeavor is 80% psychology.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative question for you to mull over, one that extends far beyond the realm of English fluency. We have spent this deep dive rigorously applying this 80-20 ratio to language.
Yeah,
But the architecture of human psychology is universal.
that's true.
If we accept the source's conclusion that mastering an incredibly complex, lifelong skill like language is actually 80% psychology and only 20% method, it forces us to look at the rest of our lives.
Wow. Yeah.
What other incredibly difficult goals in your life are you currently treating as a method problem when they are actually a psychology problem?
That is a staggering thought to end on. Are you stuck on a career pivot, or a physical fitness goal, or writing a book, endlessly researching a better routine, buying new software, searching for the perfect method, when the real barrier is simply the unacknowledged fear of looking foolish, or a lack of frictionless daily habits?
It changes the way you look at every challenge.
It really does. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this custom deep dive into your source material.
It's been a fascinating journey.
We hope it has completely rewired how you view your progress. Keep that affective filter low, design your environment so that learning is inevitable, and above all, keep embracing those messy, embarrassing, wonderful mistakes as the vital data points they are.
Keep showing up.
Take care, and remember, put the manual down and just get on the bike.